think you may be muted, Michelle.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, Michelle.
There you
Can
go.
you hear me?
Your voice is on. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining part 4 of our webinar series, How is DDLS Managing its Remote Workforce? An interview with our IT manager. My name is Michelle and I'm part of the marketing team here at DDLS. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly run through some housekeeping. This webinar is in listen mode only and will be distributed to all attendees later this afternoon. If you have any questions, please fill it in into the control panel and we'll do our best to answer them all. Today, I am pleased to be joined by Gary Duffield, our Alliances Director, and James Davidson, our ICT Manager. I'd now like to hand it over to Gary.
Well, thank you. If you want to move on to the next slide. And by the way, ladies and gents, good afternoon. This is one of 2 slides that we've got for this session. This is not going to be a PowerPoint fest. This is going to be a conversation between myself as the Alliances Director. I'm responsible for owning some of our relationships with AWS and Microsoft within our business, and with Mr. James Davidson, our august IT Manager. Now, we sat down and we thought about what we could do in these sessions. In fact, we've designed, I think there are 5 sessions in total. I was involved in the first one where we talked about some of the changes as a whole that are hitting our business, or businesses in fact, as we work in these uncertain times. And we thought, what is it that we should be doing in terms of an IT perspective? What do we need to be telling organizations or talking to organizations about around their IT infrastructure? And there's suddenly this huge realization that, you know what, we're all in exactly the same boat. We're all in a situation now where our working practices are having to change. Most of us are having to work from home, and well, some of us have to work from home. The commute's disappeared. The technology we're using has disappeared. We have completely pivoted our business, and I came up with this little image here. So the building on the left is 477 Pitt Street. That's our office in Sydney. I'm based in Perth, in fact, so I'm at least 2 hours behind most people on this call. Suddenly, we've taken a couple of floors of people who've been working hard from a sales perspective, from a delivery perspective, from an admin perspective, and we've moved all of those people pretty much lock, stock, and barrel to their houses wherever they happen to be. I'm speaking to you now from a place called Elcamos Beach. I'm using equipment that isn't controlled by James Davidson. I'm sat on a network which isn't owned by James Davidson. I'm using routers and switches that are not owned by James Davidson. I'm using software services that are not owned by James Davidson. And all of that creates kind of a huge challenge. And we've had some similar pain to that which you may be going through in your businesses, both from a people point of view, from a technology point of view. So in no way is this session, hey, you need to do this in order to be the perfect business, because frankly, DDLS is making this up as it goes along. We are building the plane as we taxi down the runway, and that's because things are changing on a daily basis. In the first session, I did a slide I was particularly proud of. It was a picture of an elephant in the classroom, and we addressed the elephant in the room head on. The COVID virus, the coronavirus, is causing all of us to think differently. Think about our businesses and the challenges we have as part of the senior leadership team. We have locations across Australia and in fact globally, and we have locations that we simply cannot attend. We cannot get students into our training centres to do training. How do we pivot? How do we reinvent our business? How do we move that forward? And we actually came up with a little bit of a model. So if I could ask you, Michelle, just to move that forward to the final slide you're going to see in this session. Dun, dun, dun. Some of the more IT people or IT literate people in the world will be familiar with the ISO 7-layer model. I was chatting with James in the week, and I said, in terms of the structure of this conversation, should we use that? And he went, yeah, that's a really good idea. And then I quickly realised we couldn't do that, so we've changed it slightly. In that conversation, James said something which has upset me deeply since he said it, and I've been contemplating and worrying about it ever since. He said, Gary said, wow, looking at some of your pictures of your home offices over the years, you were way geeky, way before my time. So I've come to the conclusion that at some point I had a time and it's not now, which is why I need James to support me in this session. The 7-layer model, the model that we've come up with, we start at the top with the pivot, how you change, what that change is, what does that look like? Clearly, one of the things that are impacted are going to be the people, and that's not just people in the IT teams, but that's people in the business. In previous sessions, and the recordings are available, we had Sue Webb talk about cultural change and managing people through that change. We need to talk about expectations. Frankly, the way we do business now is very different. I would guess, if I could ask people to put their hands up, if that was even a capability, if we were in a room right now, and I said, how many of us have been on voice calls or video calls where a small child has walked across the background, where a dog has walked past them? Once upon a time, if a dog barked, we'd all ignore it and be slightly embarrassed. But now we're like, oh, that's Biff woofing. I was literally in a meeting with a very senior HR person recently, and I watched as probably a 16 or 17-year-old child got on its hands and knees and crawled across the floor behind her on the video to get whatever it wanted to eat, and then crawl back again with a sandwich. And we thought that was hilarious. 2 months ago, that would have been incredibly unprofessional. We start to dive a little bit deeper into some of the applications and services, and then devices, and then network and security. And security, I've moved around this model, and then I really realized security really underpins everything that we're talking about here. And some of you may have tuned into the last session last week, where we had 2 of our highly trained and highly qualified security trainers talk about some of the challenges. And one of the issues we have when we talk about security is you can't press a button and actually implement a security solution which is all encompassing, because quite frankly, people are using their iPhones, they're using their Oppo phones, their tablets, their own PCs, and all manner of things. I'm sat on a whole range of kit here. My actual work PC is here. It's been turned on once because I needed a VPN to access something. So how am I sure my security here? I think that hand was raised, Michelle, from somebody. I didn't even know you could do that, because they've had a dog or a child or somebody walk across the scene. So what we thought we'd do is we thought we'd use this as a structure, and we'd just go through and we'd just talk about what's happening in our organization. On that note, I'm going to stop talking and introduce you for a second to James Davidson. And James, I'm going to start with who are you and what is it you do? What's pre-coronavirus? What was your day job?
So, I mean, since I first started at DDLS, I was actually the service manager, but quickly moved into the IT manager role. And so really just overseeing all IT operations within DDLS, vendor management, also the strategy on what applications we're going to move forward with. So any projects relating to where the business is going to move.
And you've been taking DDLS on quite a journey throughout that time, haven't you? Because we're investing heavily in a new CRM system, pre-corona happening. Clearly, we're having to rethink that a little bit now in terms of features and functionality.
That's right. And we when I first started at DDLS, and one of my first tasks was really to move our systems to our own DDLS services, where we were owned by a previous provider, and that gave us actually a new sort of playing field. We renewed all of our services, and at that point we moved to Office 365, and we went through a big transition in 2017, and that goes from everything from security cameras to all business platforms, networks, access points, and everything. So we're sitting on fairly new infrastructure, and so I guess we have a bit of a modern take on what businesses look like at the moment. And actually, looking back over the last few months, we've been fairly well positioned for this sort of pandemic in terms of being able to work remotely, and I guess we'll go into that shortly.
You would be the envy of a lot of people on this call right now, because you took a 25-year-old business which had a lot of legacy baked in by its very nature, and you were given a mandate. I mean, let's call it out. We were owned by Dimension Data many moons ago and used their services. That relationship is no longer in place. So we literally had a greenfield site, a sort of a new playing field for us to implement almost best of breed. And you've been managing that with a team. There's a few people in your team now?
Yeah, two others. We had 3, but looking to get back our systems administrator. But yeah,
and that's managing multiple locations as well, isn't it? There's seven locations you're currently looking after.
That's right. Me and the team support the DDLS business, but also our sister company, who have 2 locations. So there's about 10 locations all up, actually.
Wow. So how'd you take those?
The Philippines.
Including the Philippines, yeah. How'd you take 10 locations, all the people inside our business? We've got about 110 members of staff. How do you literally take that and pivot that overnight to a new world of working? There's a story I told. I had a review meeting with one of our big vendors yesterday, and I said, look, if we were planning to create a virtual training business, we'd take a year to do that, and then probably take 6 months to implement it. Whereas what we did, we kind of did it 4 Thursdays ago. How on earth, from the guy who underpins everything that we do, all the services, all the classrooms, all the salespeople, and everybody in all points in between, what goes through your head when the CEO calls and said, "Hey, James, we're about to turn this into a very different business"?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, because we had been work from home somewhat already, we already had the infrastructure and services to be able to deal with that. And one of the big credits I think that we have or decisions made was having that um, uh, soft phone system, Skype for Business Online or Cloud Connector Edition. So essentially, I could imagine a lot of businesses in the space of having desk phones on their desk. They can't just pick those up and walk and take them home. Whereas we, with Skype for Business, our phone system follows us no matter where we are. And we're looking to move to Teams for our phone system as well in the next 6 months. But our sister company is already using Teams for their phone system, and having that mobile phone system on your app or your PC, you're not constrained by any office location. So the question of are we good to start operating from home? I mean, for the office workers, yeah, it wasn't that big of a task. It's really just making sure that everyone actually remembers to take their laptop chargers home actually. And there's more to it than that, of course, but we were quite well positioned for those things that are, I could imagine often trouble businesses.
So what I'm hearing is it's your fault. My phone calls follow me around, and 9 o'clock last night the phone rang, and it's Gary, I spotted the green symbol. Are you okay? You okay? Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I mean the world of work is changing, and clearly we'll talk about that. So here's a leading question for you. If there's an organisation today who's still got a phone system, they're still stuck in 1980, they've still got a PABX sat in the corner of the office somewhere clicking away, assuming they've got infrastructure, they've got networks and computers. Do you go to Officeworks and buy this capability? What's the kind of default?
Well, I do see a lot of people sort of probably scurrying to these sorts of online phone systems, which may be not well thought out for after this pandemic. There are a lot of phone systems that you can just go out and subscribe to on the web and get phone numbers from those providers, but that may be a mistake. There's a lot out there, but actually planning that migration for a larger company is a very large project because you need to retain those phone numbers. So it's not a super easy move, and I do worry about it though, because I could imagine that those decisions would be made in haste. But once you do have that capacity, it really does follow you around. And like you say, your green dot on your on Teams, your presence, right? As soon as it goes from red to green, you're going to expect a call in just a few minutes. So you really can't get away from it, but it certainly is an effective tool.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that. I know, and I've checked my phone in the middle of the night if I've been awake, and I've been known to have people on other sides of the planet going, "Yo, Gary, did you get that email?" No. I'm somewhere between asleep and going to the loo and going back to sleep. Please leave me alone. I'll see you in about 4 hours.
And actually, also with contact centers, contact centers with 1-800 numbers and routing practices that need to be maintained. It's no big deal that they all just work from home. The call routing works in the same way, and not a call's missed. So we've been quite fortunate on that point of view. So the pivot has really been focused on our training delivery. I mean, we've always accommodated people joining DDLS classrooms from home. We've just had to scale that up quite significantly. And I guess there comes the problem with instructor home networks if they are actually working from home. But for the most part, we do still operate that from our offices, as you know. But because we've had a lot of the IT environment sort of prepped for work from home already, the pivot also has really relied on DDLS IT helping out the communications to accommodate for remote delivery. All of a sudden, things that we were just passing to people, such as courseware, needs to be put into a digital format and put online in some way, and then communicated to all those students. And we have up to 400 students weekly, and that content changes very often. So that's where we've really been putting our time over the last couple of weeks.
And that probably pushes us down the model into people, because suddenly we have a lot of new processes, and our processes are going to be unique to what we do for a business. But part of your role has suddenly evolved to helping us evolve those processes and working out how technology supports that. Particularly around making sure people can access courseware, making sure people can access labs, etc. And also, we had some challenges recently where some cloud services weren't available, and we had to make sure that we could spin up, provide those resources to our clients. So I think there's a certain amount of thinking on your feet that's having to occur. Would you agree?
Yeah, certainly. The people problem has been quite prominent, and it's really
it's not a people problem; it's a people opportunity.
That's right, a people opportunity. Where we do have staff members, dedicated to being on site in the branch, welcoming the students, preparing lunches, all these different things, and now they've had to pivot and work on a completely different set of tasks, and it needs to be now digital. Whereas now first they were passing these things to the students and having that face-to-face engagement. They're now needing to do it using our CRM systems, which need that information in there, or they're not armed with the right amount of information to give to the students. Also, the people. I mean, we've had a lot more to do with our students. Typically they walk into the classroom and those student technical problems are looked after by the instructors. So we've actually had to open up the support channels to our students directly to this IT support team to make sure people can get into those meetings, to make sure the courseware material is understood, logins and stuff need to work. So we have had to change, and I mean the people have shifted their workload, and they do need different skills when doing that.
And that applies to us because of the business we're in. But again, people on this call right now, if they're making a lot of use of Zoom, there's been some security concerns with Zoom. If they're using Teams, if they're switching from one to another because there's been a mandate, some people might still be using Skype for Business. By its very nature, the fact we're using a much more of those tools, we're going to have many more support. Because an example I can think of is my dear wife Yvonne. She did her first ever Zoom session the other day to join virtual yoga, and it probably took 15 minutes of support from me to help her on that journey, work out how to turn the camera on, why can't you see anybody, because that's not her world, right? She's used to working in an office. She's a payroll HR administrator, and now I know it's not a business context. It was something that was frivolous almost, but that's outside of a comfort zone, whereas it's very much inside mine. Just want to spin back to we were talking about people and the changes to roles and processes. You lead a team. You got IT professionals in your team. They're incredibly good at their job. How do you take those guys on this journey? How easy was it? Are people being accepting? There'll be IT managers on this call now who have got teams of people working for them who've been through some similar pain. What did we feel? Did we feel any pain at all?
For the internal support, not really. I mean, we're now dealing with not problem solving our own networks, and when it comes to call quality, we're now not relying on our quality of service applications. We use Cinefer to make sure our Skype for Business phone calls are always of high quality, but all of a sudden we don't have that. Businesses put a lot of effort into making sure call quality's top notch, and all of a sudden our tools are no longer there. So we have to make sure our staff members, our support team is tactful at being able to problem solve somebody's private home connection. I don't want to, criticize Gary's internet service. I can't just say, oh, you're paying not enough. You need to be skilled at being able to ask the right questions and diagnose those problems. So I think that's actually something that we've had to shift to and investigate a little further.
It's a real customer service edge, isn't it? And that's certainly not covered in any ITIL course that we offer, how to help people log their fault when there's screaming kids in the background and half the internet's being used for Netflix by somebody in another room.
Yeah, that's right. And for the most part, the NBN arrived at the perfect time for Australia. And I realize that there's some issues out there, but we typically see connections are actually quite strong, but the internal router is old and terrible. Bad Wi-Fi strength is often a thing, but people just don't know to look for those sorts of things. And so those sorts of skills to diagnose those and be tactful in that has actually been different. And then also, the same things applies for our students who are attending. They may not be aware of even what ISP they have in a lot of cases because someone else in the family takes care of it, and you need to ask those questions. You need to find out what the deal is. Otherwise, you're not really going to get to the root cause of the issue.
That's an expectations thing, I think, a little bit, which nudges us down the model almost accidentally. I have a friend who lives on the estate where I live who's trying to do some work, and I've tried to support her remotely using Facebook as the messenger tool of choice. And the internet performance has been woeful. She couldn't have this kind of video conference, and that was down to the fact that she has an expectation that she's got the internet, therefore it's going to work, irrespective of the fact that she's sat several miles away from the router, and she didn't realize that there were different modes that router could go in. So I think there's almost an education of people how to use their own home technology. Certainly I discovered that, just switching to 5G was a step in the right direction. So don't it would be very easy to say, oh, your internet's rubbish, walk away, you're not going to be able to do this. But with a little bit of work, move closer, I was able to help her.
Yeah, that's right. And this is all just like, what's your wall material made out of? Is your router sitting behind a fridge, which is just, a big radio detector? Even, water is one of the biggest, blockers of Wi-Fi signals. So, is your router behind a fish tank in the line of sight from your laptop?
It's your router behind the fish tank. That's in all these little glowing fish wandering. Neon tetra's glowing even because it's dark.
Yeah, well, you got to think of those things, and it's a bit of a shift because it's not what you'd normally ask, because everyone's usually in an office with an access point right above their head, and there's rarely that sort of problem.
Well, my dear daughter has moved back home from university, so there's 3 of us in the house now. So 3 of us, and I checked recently I've recently bought a mesh network. There were 15 devices in this house, all consuming the internet. We're very fortunate we've got fiber to the house. But, on the very first slide in the land of home working, NBN is king. If you haven't got that connectivity, if you haven't got that pipe, that's a challenge. If you've got that pipe and it's not being used well enough or correctly, some of the comments you just made around putting it behind the fish tank, the fridge, etc. Those are sensible things that you can change easily.
Yeah, and I think even I've noticed on NBN advertisements on the radio or advisories, just sort of regarding the current climate, they're indicating that home routers are actually of quite low quality. The ACCC did a report on that actually, and that's one of the big weak points to the NBN is actually people's home hardware that is rather cheap and provided by the ISP. And a lot of the time, that's actually the problem, not necessarily the NBN connection.
There's a moral there somewhere. I just can't quite see it. Somebody just mentioned in the chat that they live alone and they've got 10 devices. So I thought we were doing really well. 14 between 3. So basically, I need to go to JB Hi-Fi and buy more devices. That's what I'm working out from that.
Yeah. That's right. And it's not easy for these low-end routers to deal with 10 devices, and that could be even small. I've got 7 people in this house and, up to 40 devices connected at one time. So I need a really good router to be able to manage.
Wow, so you're basically running a business from home. So
too many kids.
so as we go on this journey, we've talked about the people change, your teams changing. I mean, there are some fundamental changes. We're not commuting anymore, and we talked about that. We talked about people now could be logging on at 6 in the morning rather than at 7 in the morning because they've not got that hour's commute. One of the huge things that we've done, and we were already on top of this, but it was almost like something we did at the side of our business, not at the very core of our business, and that's leveraging Teams. We looked at Slack, we looked at other teams, and we settled on Teams. We are using Teams an awful lot. It's interesting to me working on documents the other night. We're all working on that document together, which we kind of did previously, except now we're almost doing it with purpose. We're using Teams more as well for chat. We're using it more for collaboration. You'll know we've got company-wide teams just to get people together, just so everybody knows what's going on in the business. So that must have created two things. One is the cultural change in the business, which I know Sue talked about in one of the other sessions. But clearly, I support paradigm for you because you're supporting both the technology and users getting frustrated because it doesn't work like they think it should work.
Well, but actually, for the most part, things have been working, and those technologies, like Teams, have almost given us more communication than we ever have, even more than when we were in the office. Interestingly, and like you say, Teams does a lot more than just chats or phone calls. I mean, it's a meeting platform. It's it can do all that Zoom does. Really great platform. And as soon as we get our phone system in there, we'll completely get rid of Skype for Business and be all on Teams. and we also work with our sister company. Communicating externally with those have been it's been a really great tool for that.
My kit bag, as a user of services, as part of the leadership team here at DDLS, as a user of your services, Teams is number one for me. Clearly, well, actually, email's probably number one, but Teams is a very close second. I'm living my life in those two applications, and occasionally VPN access to get access to CRM. So, what was the story about mobile devices and all of this? So, if you think about applications, mobile devices, tablets, people's phones, did that just follow along? I mean, I think I saw an email from you saying, hey guys, if you could all just stop using your phones for a little while because we've used several terabytes of data.
No, that was just of course keeping that under control. Some people are working from home, don't have a great internet connection, so of course they start tethering, but they don't turn that tether off, right? So they continue to use the mobile devices even after work's finished, and then Netflix turns on.
And we were probably guilty of not providing the guidance. That's not you, that's us as a business. Hey, if you're using your mobile phone, you got to be cognizant of the fact that if you start watching Netflix, you're basically consuming data from your phone, and there is a finite limit to that. If that's the extent of the challenges that we had, then I think we're probably doing okay.
Well, no, I mean, there's still other challenges, of course, with mobile device management and the policies around security, which can be, mainly undertaken with Office 365 and Intune, which we're yet to fully migrate to. But there are certainly next steps that DDLS can take that would need to be well thought out. But currently our corporate machines are joined to our corporate domain, which is an on-premise domain. We can't connect to that over the internet without our VPN services. And so, next steps for our business would actually be migrating to Azure AD, or Microsoft 365. So we don't actually need our on-prem domain services. And our computers just register over the internet, and we can control password management and computer security and group policy management even without that VPN. So there are steps we need to take, or that we can take and should take in time to be able to truly move to remote management for those devices. Like when you mention, people's home internet connections, I don't know if people actually are using a 4G router to get internet for work from home. I'm not sure of that. So I can't necessarily just push out, gigabytes of updates on someone's personal connection. So there is this element of, how much do we manage while everyone's work from home? I don't want to saturate people's home connection. I would usually, just do that all the time when they're at the workplace, because I've got local channels or local connections, which make that very speedy and isn't a concern to the person's home connection.
Yeah, and that's tough, because clearly one of the things you want to do is make sure people have secure devices as they tumble in the direction of our networks. And as we proceed down the model, we've kind of stumbled through devices and almost ended up at network. But I want to raise security just above that. I would never ask you to talk about our security and how we implement that. That would obviously be a very foolhardy thing to do, but we're very aware of things like BitLocker on our own devices, but you can't enforce that on somebody else's. One of the things I think that we've done particularly well from a user perspective is there's an awful expression that one of our vendors uses called eating your own dog food. We've literally done what we do for a living. Mm-hmm. We got everybody in the business, as you know, to complete something called Resilia Frontline, which really is about helping people spot those phishing attempts, to be a little bit more cognizant of security. And there's a great, actually it's a great, really bad report I saw on LinkedIn this morning of just how many people are exploiting people over the COVID virus and sending out phishing attempts and all of the rest of it. Now, without giving too much detail, is there a helicopter view of security, end user security in a home working environment that you'd be happy to share?
Well, I mean, when a corporate device is in the home, it should be secure if the right firewall policies are in place.
But I remind you, sir, corporate device hasn't been turned on, and you said there's no control over what people are using. So, you don't know that I'm using our Zoom account right now on a HP Elite book that's using my own licenses.
Yeah, that's right. And so, I mean, with Office 365, of course, you can access everything through the browser, and I think all businesses need to have that balance of convenience versus security. There are actually ways for businesses to limit the amount of devices that can access Office 365. Maybe it should just be, a corporate device only access, and we don't trust your home computers. Because what I see right now is, of course, people are making do with what they have. They may not get a laptop from their workplace, and they're tempted to use their desktop computer, which we don't know the state of. So, I think all businesses really need to take a look at their security policies within their email provider or productivity tools, and their, I assume that most people are using file storage within the cloud nowadays. What devices are allowed to access that? And that's a really tough question, because you still need to allow people to work with the devices they have. But there still needs to be control there. So it's certainly not up for any business to say what should be done, but it could be quite a scary situation out there when it comes to someone dusting off an 8-year-old computer running Windows XP, right, and then logging into their corporate OneDrive and loading the files from corporate OneDrive or SharePoint for that matter onto their potentially very unmanaged computer.
I caught up with one of our trainers earlier on, a chap called Adrian Smith, and this is a great example of somebody who's got it right at home. We were doing an Azure course, somebody was consuming that from home, and they couldn't access Azure because their firewall was blocking it. And almost the way Adrian pitched it is that was a bad thing. And I'm like, no, you need to think about that differently. That's actually a really good thing. It means that individual or somebody in that household has set up the systems so that they are robust and they are secure. You will be pleased to hear that yesterday's or Patch Tuesday's updates, security updates for Windows 10, they're on my machine, and this is going to give me great pleasure. That I probably know something that you don't know. I happen to know that James and I use the same home network, in fact, for all the world to see. There it is on a shelf, because I'm practicing shelf isolation. That is a Orbi mesh network. There was a security update only last night, so I have the latest version of the BIOS. Did you know that?
No, I haven't updated mine yet, but I'm sure I'll be jumping on straight away. But
there you go. But that, I mean, although I was a bit flippant, that actually makes the point really that you don't have control over that. It's just my inner geek is channeled that I have to have the biggest numbers. Therefore, I'm going to go away and do that.
Yeah, and you could imagine, Gary, like at the moment when everyone's running around trying to make do with what they've got, a lot of shadow IT will pop up, right? And if your business doesn't have that control or service in place for the employees, they may go out and find their own solution. And that's where the rush to Zoom really came up. All these businesses didn't have a video conferencing solution, but Zoom sitting there with a free tier account, and 200 million people were using it daily.
If you can do it in 40 minutes, you can have the free account. But I think you're right. I don't think it's about just having the right equipment and apps. It's also about having the right policies, and it's also keeping to time, because I strongly suggest that because Michelle's put up a big thing that says Q&A, we've probably talked for the 35 minutes that we intended to. Would that be right, Michelle?
Yes, it is, Gary.
And do we have any questions?
We do have a question here. I'll just read it out. Okay, so the question is, how do you manage the devices? We are considering Intune. We also control a lot via GPO at login, but now we have to change this as users log in locally, then connect to the VPN, which negates the GPO actions.
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of companies are facing this loss of control where a VPN is necessary to get those group policy objects to actually take place on somebody's computer. Essentially, if you don't have that, it's a computer out on the internet that really never gets to check in. So for that, Azure AD would be a choice where you can manage those those endpoints from the Azure platform with a combination of Intune as well. Currently, we don't use Intune. We actually use an endpoint management software called BigFix by IBM, but certainly Intune is our destination, as that is actually a more complete, endpoint management platform. And group policies can also be applied through the Azure AD platform. And then you're truly, remote workers, essentially. It doesn't matter if they're on site or remote. it doesn't care where you are. You could be on the moon.
It's a very different world. If this had happened 10 years ago, there'd be no consistency of software on people's machines. There'd be no ability to do that. People wouldn't have Outlook, or I can't get my email, I can't open the files. The fact we're solving these problems rather than the I can't open email, testament to the state of technology today. Do we have more questions, Michelle?
No more questions are coming through.
I see one here from Lisa Thomas, actually, in the chat. I might just read that out.
I'll go for it.
I've heard many companies have blocked Zoom due to security issues. Do you have any concerns using Zoom rather than another platform or other platform? Yeah, so that's right. There has been a lot of media attention when it comes to Zoom, and we're a big consumer of Zoom. We use it to deliver our training, and we've actually run into many companies who have limited or just completely ceased the use of Zoom. And there's two reasons for that. And number one, likely was security to initiate that. While there were some security concerns, other platforms actually do have those same security concerns, and Zoom has been very quick to patch those. And they've got a very robust, and they're moving quite quickly on a 90-day security plan to work on all these different things, which actually make Zoom such a popular product. But I think the second reason, and a more hard to argue with reason, is really just to block Zoom because everybody's flocking to it. I think that's actually more of a shadow IT issue as well as security. So while Zoom's had a pretty rough couple of weeks, I don't necessarily have big issues with it. I mean, we use passwords for our delivery, but you could imagine staff using insecure meetings with no password would be a common thing, and that combined with a meeting ID that doesn't change can be easily,
I know. I thought it'd just be us three on this call, and apparently there are still 36 people left in the call. So who on earth are all these people? We do also use Teams for classroom delivery. We chose Zoom way back in the depth of time because it was the only product that was really available and robust enough to connect two classrooms together. But we're doing an awful lot of training using Teams. We are using the tools at our disposal. That's
right. Now classrooms connect to Zoom sort of quite well, right? Like our usual delivery model is the instructors in a classroom with a whiteboard behind them with a telepresence unit from Cisco, which dial into those Zoom meetings. And so Zoom has really good capabilities to be able to do that. But yeah, also we're leveraging Teams now for certain training as that platform matures, which it's come a long way in 3 years, and it's
almost on a daily basis. I was on a call on Teams earlier on, which now has the raise your hand capability.
Yeah,
that actually wasn't there yesterday, or as far as I know, it wasn't there yesterday. 3 days ago, you could change your background.
Yeah, that's right.
As you know, because I changed mine to things that aren't even in the box, and you were like, "Wow, you're some kind of geek from another time."
Teams certainly is. Like very well positioned to take on a lot of other competing products. It's kind of scary to realize how much it covers, and I have a lot of hope for that platform.
So I've got a technical question for Michelle.
Yes.
What's the next session in this series?
The next session is with Sue, and it's maintaining productivity when working from home.
So Sue's our process manager. She does a lot of sort of people courses around the way people think. So if that's of interest, how do people find out more about it?
So with the recording, they'll be emailed to everyone this afternoon. There'll be links to register for next Friday.
Oh, that's fabulous. Did we have any more questions?
Let me take a quick look.
People are very welcome. I don't know if you put our emails address up, but people are very welcome to certainly reach out to me, gary.duffield@ddls.com.au, or even find me on LinkedIn. And hopefully you got some value from learning a little bit about our journey from the actual pivot right the way through to the router behind the fish tank, which is now the thing I'm going to think every time I see my fish tank. It's like, I need to put the router in there.
And remember, a body is also like 90-something% water. So a body in front of a Wi-Fi router is not great. That's why they should be on the roof.
Yeah, I think I'm 110% water, to be fair.
So there's no more questions coming through, guys. And I think that's, actually there's one more that just came through.
Oh, excellent. We like questions. Either ask questions or we got to go back to work. Please ask questions.
Do you want me to, you can read that one, Michelle?
Yeah, I'll read this one out. Probably this would be a question to Microsoft. I guess a lot of us are wondering how to view additional video screen. At the moment, Teams only shows max of 4 screens per meeting. Any settings that we may have overlooked or could be tricky to do?
No, that's actually something that Microsoft is working quite fiercely on, and of course COVID has actually brought around more development into Teams. But if you look on the user voice website from Microsoft, you'll see that that feature request has been in there for many years, and Microsoft have announced that they're increasing that. I believe it's to 9, but it may be more. I don't think it would be long at all before Teams now supports more than 4 video streams at a time.
So I got in trouble last year for inadvertently leaking something to 70,000 people because nobody told me it was a secret. But on some of the calls I've had with people, I've heard it could be as recent. It could be before the end of this month.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be far down the road, and you know it may be more than nine video streams at a time as well. They've been spending a lot of time on it, so I assume it's going to be good.
Look at the growth they've had, you know, rather like Zoom's gone through the roof, as has Teams. I mean, there are other platforms. GoToMeeting is one I quite like, GoToWebinar. There are a lot of these things that exist right now, and suddenly they're what we have to do business with.
And you've got to pick the right one for your business too, you know, like if you're not in the Microsoft ecosystem, there's certainly other products out there that would integrate better, but you've got to consider that because like I said before, you know, companies may find that they make rash decisions right now and get themselves into trouble when they stumble back into the workplace and all of a sudden that solution wasn't well thought out.
Yeah, I've noticed a number of my friends pop up as CTO as a service. And I think arguably there's a need for that right now. So if you're a small business, IT has never been at the center of what you do, and you're about to make a huge decision as to, you know, I don't know, maybe it's not a huge decision, but implementing Zoom for your business, maybe it's worth just sanity checking with your partner of choice or your local IT company.
That's right.
Okay, and we've got another question here. I'll just read it out. Do you have a technical way to track people's work hours, like clocking on and off? Of course, trust is a factor.
No, not necessarily. I mean, something that we do practice in this company a lot is really just the presence within Teams and Skype for Business. I mean, mainly Skype for Business, but you know, I don't think with that sort of company that check in and out, there's a high degree of trust for DDLS. And you know, I've never seen anything to sort of doubt the fact that our method has been quite effective. Our people and performance team has also, you know, they're big promoters of these technologies, and I think that's important to take on. You know, people and performance are always flying the flag for whatever platform we're using to make sure that engagement is high. And in all of our surveys, we've got very high engagement throughout the workforce. I mean, but to answer the question, there are ways to be able to track activity through Office 365 using Power BI, and it actually is somewhat natively built in by Microsoft to be able to look at productivity. But I'm sure those tools are to be used with trust and understanding. And of course, just because somebody's not on Office 365 or using one of the pieces to that doesn't mean they're not productive either. So it's not like an open and shut case, I don't think.
Yeah, we've always had a policy, I think, as a business of managing by results rather than by presence. And I know that's a mantra of a lot of organizations. As long as the job gets done, actually, we don't mind if you're up a mountain doing that job or you're working through the night to do that. It becomes about results. One of the challenges we have with Teams is that one of the features that's not yet there is an attendance log. Unless it's arrived in the last couple of days, it wasn't there. So if you're using it from a training perspective, how do you work out if people, you know, who turned up and who? It's not a problem for courses with 10, 15 people, but some of the awareness sessions that we're doing right now, you know, cloud awareness, we might have 50 people. You wouldn't necessarily notice if somebody hadn't come back after lunch. So we are looking forward to seeing more sophisticated tools for managing who's turned up and who hasn't. WebEx does that very well.
Excellent. Thanks, Gary and James. There's no more questions left, which will conclude us for today. I want to thank Gary and James for your excellent presentation today. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you all have a lovely weekend.
And only 2 slides. Brilliant.
Thanks, Gary.
guys.
Thanks, Michelle.
Cheers, guys. Have a good afternoon.
See everybody. Bye-bye.